Daphne Hacker with that report. Well, the tension over migrants fleeing unrest in North Africa coincides with a rise of far-right populist parties that have put pressure on mainstream governments in Europe. President Nicolas Sarkozy of France has taken a strong anti-immigration stance of late. Italy's coalition government gets support from the Northern League, which runs an anti-immigration platform. So what does all of this mean for Europe? I'm joined in the studio by Baroness Sarah Ludford, a Liberal Democrat member of the European Parliament, and from UKIP, that is the UK Independence Party, David Coburn. Now we're also joined on the phone from Geneva by Jean-Philippe Chauzy from the International Organization for Migration. But first, Baroness Ludford, if I could start with you. These are economic migrants, so why don't just send them home? I mean, they shouldn't really be there. They're not refugees, are they, fleeing political hardship?
Well, some might be, and the responsibility is on Italy in the first instance to assess the claim of anyone who does lodge a claim for asylum. This is a duty under Italy's national law and under EU law.
But Tunisia has had a revolution now. I mean, it's not facing political pressures or...
Well, there could still be people who can make a case, individual case of persecution. I honestly don't know whether any of those who have arrived do, but Italy must make that assessment if anybody does lodge an asylum claim. But if they don't, well then it's true that as economic migrants, unless Italy can fit them into its a national programme for economic migration, then no, they wouldn't have a right to stay, but one would expect them to at least be properly looked after before they can be returned in an orderly way.
But was Italy wrong then in giving them these permits to travel around Europe?
Yes, I think that law is on the side of France in terms of the law of Schengen. I don't buy the statement from Mr. Moroni, the Italian minister. As my understanding, as the European Commission has backed France on this, that France is able to apply a test of financial, that a migrant can have,
they have enough
financial
money
support,
to not draw,
yes, so as not to, potentially claim welfare in France. But it has to be said, I do acknowledge that, the EU is not shaping up well on this matter.
We'll talk about that later, about actually what it means for the future of the European Union. I mean, David Coburn, you'd obviously send them back, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. I don't see why...
No hesitation there?
None whatever. I don't see any reason why they can't go to another Arabic country. There are plenty of others. They could easily be sent on to Egypt and the European Union or European countries or indeed the Arab League.
What do you mean by that? That actually being Arab, that they sort of don't fit in Europe?
Well, I think that there is a problem culturally with this. There is an enormous amount of problems with...
So if they were white Christian, that would be okay, would it?
No, because economically that's our real problem, is the economics of it all. At the moment, Europe has plunged the European continent into potential financial catastrophe with the euro. People are losing jobs left, right and centre. You have riots in Greece. Spain's about to collapse financially. France is in severe trouble. Italy's in severe trouble. We just can't afford to...
It's been a bad week for Europe, and certainly, David, we'll come to talk about that later. But just on the specific question of these refugees now, the 30,000 or so who've gone there, I mean, do you think Italy should have simply, as it were, put them on a boat back immediately? Or do you understand Italy's position of saying, well, we need to share the burden and allow other European Union states to deal with some of them?
No, certainly not. I think that they should be put into a camp at the moment and they should be sent to another Arab country. The reason they're coming to Italy or to Europe is economic. Otherwise, why not go to another Arab country next door? Why don't the Libyans go to Egypt, which is just right across the border?
Clear, there is nothing bad about seeking to better yourself. Doesn't mean you have a legal right to migrate to the EU, but people should not be condemned. I mean, migrants make a huge contribution to the countries of the European Union. So we must distinguish between, condemning individuals for seeking a better life.
No one's condemning individuals.
And assessing whether they have a legal right to migrate. And one of the problems is the EU does not have a well-managed legal migration system, and we haven't given enough free trade to the countries of North Africa to enable economic opportunity at home.
Actually, let us turn basically an intolerant environment. I mean, that's what your party's sort of developing in a sense, isn't it? I mean, isn't that happening throughout Europe now, that migrants are being treated in an intolerable way? Because it's quite complicated, as we heard, you know, Jean-Philippe said, that, you know, some of these people are from Libya, from a war-torn situation, have nowhere to go. You can't just simply pick them up and put them on a boat and send everyone back.
Well, this excuse has been used for years, but it's a settled view, I think, of the vast majority of the British population that we cannot have any more immigrants here. We can't afford them. We haven't got the space for them. The economy is in a very serious situation. It's all very well for lawyers or doctors or somebody in the upper echelons who don't have to worry about this. But if you're a working man, you lose your job to immigrants who can work for cheaper prices. It's just simply not acceptable. UKIP came second to the Labour Party in the recent by-election. We beat the Liberals and the Conservatives. And I think that you're going to see more of that in the future.
Well, is it a coincidence? Because, I mean, far-right parties, of course, the Front National in France has been there as a major feature. You've also got, obviously...
Well, we're not a far-right party. We're a libertarian party. We're,
well, a right-of-centre party, anyway.
I wouldn't say that at all. But a lot of our supporters coming from the Labour Party now, ex-Labour voters. We are a very libertarian party. We're not interested.
You're appealing to the fears of some people about immigration,
I think people have absolutely legitimate fears. If you were trying to go down to Tesco's and fill your shopping bag on a Saturday, it's very expensive. You've got to try and find a job to pay for that. And it's also creating pressure on housing. There's not enough housing to go around. The establishment, the Liberals, the Conservatives, Labour Party, you couldn't put a cigarette paper between any of them on their policy on immigration. They have simply not taken it seriously. Well, and I'll tell you something else very important. This is the French, regarding the French. The French can also stop the Schengen agreement with Italy on the grounds of national security. And none of these people are being vetted. We don't know who they are. They could be Al-Qaeda, they could be anything. And the Europol have recently put out a report stating that this is a great danger. We could be importing all sorts of people into Europe.
Okay.
It could be terrible.
Baroness Ludford,
David has had you know, a bit of an anti-immigrant rant. I would just like to say that I believe that Europe has benefited from migration, but it does have to be well controlled. That is absolutely true. And
but he's saying
it
the major
hasn't
parties
always
aren't doing anything. Certainly in Britain, they're not doing anything about it. And only he could, you know, they could.
Well, I believe.
Eastern European
no, we don't. No, there is a right of free movement within the EU. So let's just leave the EU.
Yes,
free
but no, we want to leave
it.
the EU,
Well,
as many increasing numbers of British people.
I'd be delighted if I could just get my point across. But anyway, let's park that for the moment. But for non-EU immigration, I do think that one could reproach the Labour government for 13 years that it didn't really convey a sense that it had well-managed immigration. I mean,
backed by the Liberals.
The bureaucracy. No, we did not back the Labour government.
Yes,
We're in opposition to the Labour
supported
government.
Their policies.
Please, David, can you just give us a break? We did not back Labour. We put forward various proposals for a good immigration policy, and Labour simply did not get the administration and the management well, including not making sure that the areas of the country which had pressure from migration also got public money for schools and hospitals and so on. So that was a recipe for creating resentment. But the fact is, I mean, the UK actually has a growing population. Other countries in Europe are declining fast, and by the middle of the century we will actually have a shortage of people of working age. So if we just raise our horizons a little bit to a longer term, Europe does need a proper migration policy, and to acknowledge the debt we pay to migration. We also, however, need to train our own young people to make sure that happens.
Very quickly, please. Yeah.
Yes, the health service will not survive in this country, and neither will social services, if you continue with this immigration.
Okay. Well, let's. I want to take
anybody who goes to a hospital knows this to be true.
Isn't that the point, David Coburn? That you're painting this brush. You'd send everyone back on the boat, so to speak. That actually it's very complicated, and economic needs are much more complicated than you actually present them. And your policy is developing an intolerance in society, and shouldn't that be a concern?
I don't see why. Our candidate in the Leicester East by-election at the moment happens to be Asian and happens to hold the same views I do. One of the chaps who stood for...
You're not worried about intolerance or Islamophobia that might result from these policies?
I think there is a problem in this country with Islam, political Islam, and it has to be dealt with. It can't be ignored. And the people of this country do not want further immigration. It's very, very clear.
Baroness?
Well, I think people would be much happier if we had demonstrably well-managed immigration, and then that, and you know, that is that. Well, no, that I think would go a way to reassure people. I think people, I mean, contrary to what Derek said about the NHS and the care system, we know how much the NHS and social care depend on migrants.
I want to talk, we've got very brief
European MP, you don't have to use the health service like the rest of us.
I do use
10 seconds.
Yes, but you don't have to.
Has this damaged Europe? It's been a bad week for Europe. 10 seconds. David?
Yes, I think it's another nail in the coffin. That combined with the collapse of the euro is going to be the end of the European Union within 5 years.
5 years, would you agree, Baroness?
Absolutely
or is that right?
not. There are stresses and strains. Schengen is not going to collapse. The EU is not going to collapse. But you know, some national governments are playing to the gallery on this, and which I think is unfortunate.
Okay. Listen, that's all we've got time for before a short break. And thank you to our guests for this lively discussion.